I is that someone is going to be using that data. That's it. That's all I want to say. And now, of course, we can talk about router in Express. All right. I think we're moving along quite nicely. But as you can see, the moment we're starting to have more routes and more functionality, we have another issue. And that issue, of course, is the fact that our app.js is getting quite busy. And technically, we don't even have that many routes. So, what is the solution? Well, the solution is using Express Router, where we can group those routes together. And then, as far as the functionality, we can actually set them up as separate controllers. Now, eventually, in the next example, when we work with database, I'll cover again the common setup, which is called MVC. Basically, it is a pattern. It's not a rule, but it is a nicely used pattern when you're setting up the API. But we are missing the model part in the MVC pattern because we haven't connected the database. So I'll just leave it at that. Just please keep in mind whatever I'm about to show you in this video and in the next. Yes, it is a pretty common convention and pattern. So I also suggest sticking to that. Now, also, I want to mention that in this video, we will do a bit of copy and pasting, meaning we'll have to refactor the code. Because I think this is a perfect example for us to set up the router, where we already have some code, so you can clearly see the benefits of setting up the router instead of me coming up with some empty routes and then saying that, yes, that is the best pattern. So, with that said, first, where we have the request, the post request for API Postman people, I want you to change this around a little bit. So as you can see, I keep going back and forth. In this case, I want to go with API people, and then let's just say Postman. Again, it doesn't really matter. We're not going to make requests anymore from the Postman in these examples. Anyway, this is just about our code structure. And then once we change this around, I also want to move this login up, just so it's a bit clearer what we're doing. So take this login route and keep moving, and just place it on top of your routes. And there it is. Now, of course, I have my login. And now notice the pattern where, yes, I have one route for the login, but then rest of them. I have API people, API people, API people Postman, API people ID. And hopefully you get the gist. Again, I have API people ID. So wouldn't it be nicer if I could somehow group all the API people and also add one for the login, but basically in a separate file? And the way we can do that is by setting up the router. Now, again, common convention is just creating another folder. So I just want to make sure that I'm actually doing that in the Express tutorial. Let's create a new folder, and common convention is calling this routes. And then you just come up with whatever name you want. Now, in my case, I'm going to go auth for the login because we're just going to imagine that maybe there's going to be one for register, one for logout or whatever. And then there's going to be one for the people. So that's going to be for my API and people. So let's set up these two files. I will zoom in massively just so you don't think that I'm cheating. So let's go here with auth.js. This is where I'll place my login one. And also right away set up my people.js. Okay, awesome. I'll start working in people.js because it's going to be a little bit interesting. And then we'll do the same thing in the auth as well. And the way we set this up, we simply start by requiring the express. So we go here, express, require, and of course the module name is express. And then instead of setting up the app, we go with router and we explicitly get the router from the express. So this is going to be a router instance that takes care of the routing instead of the app. So we're not going to do the routing anymore in our app.js. Well, sort of, we'll use the middleware, but as far as the specific URLs, we'll handle that in this routes people file. And the way we set up the router, we go with router, and that one is equal to, like I said, express dot, and then we go with capital letter router, and then we invoke it. Awesome. That's a great start. We can save this sucker. And now I want you to go back to app.js and don't grab the login. That's why I set it up separately above all the routes, but grab all of the ones with API and people. So take these suckers here all the way up to delete. Basically stop at listen, cut it out, and then copy and paste in people like so. Okay, great. So now, of course, I have all my routes here. Now, our next step is actually changing from app to router because I want the router to handle derouting. So in my case, I'm going to select all of my apps like so. So I'm just doing that with Command D in the Visual Studio Code. And at this point, I should have multiple cursors like so. And I'll set up my router. And now all the way in the bottom, I want to go with module, not exports. And of course, at the moment, I'm exporting my router. And then once we export a router, of course, in the app.js, I want to set up a app.use where I'll say, yes, for the path that starts with API and people, I want to use my people router. And the way it's going to look like, we're going to go back. And at this point, we have people here. And as a side note, actually, we need to cut it out, but we're not going to use it here as well. Eventually, the setup is going to be different. So for now, yes, please cut it out and copy and paste in the people. But since we'll be setting up the controls, we'll have to do that one more time anyway. So I guess I'm going to go below the router. I'm going to look for my people. Otherwise, my functionality won't make sense. And in this case, remember, we are sitting already in routes. So I need to go 2 levels up and I still need to look for my data, correct? So now, of course, our functionality should work. Hopefully we don't have some weird bugs. And then, like I said, in the app.js, now, of course, I would want to use my app.use. So I'm going to go below express.json and I'm going to say app.use. And now I need to set up that base route. Now, what is my base route here? Well, it is API and people, correct? Because this is just my route. And then in some cases, I have the postman or I have the ID. That's it. But the base stays the same. Okay, awesome. So we provide this path. We say API and then people. And now I want to set up that router. And of course, in order to set up that router, I need to import it. And you can call it people router. You can just call it people. Again, that is really up to you. I'm just going to say people is equal. And now we need to require it. And remember, we have a folder by the name of what? Routes. And then we also have people file. Okay, awesome. We require our router here, correct? So that's our router and we're exporting. Awesome. So we get the people. And like I said, with use, we can use the path if we want. So this is not going to be applied to all of them. This is only going to be applied to the ones that start with API people. And then we pass in the people. We'll save it, but there is a problem. You see, once we set up this router with a base path in the people, actually, we have a mess right now because we already have the base for our router in app.js where we have API people. And now in the people.js, if you check it out, we actually have API people / API people. So I fully understand that this is going to look a bit drastic, but in order for this to work, we actually remove everything. We remove that base. So we go here with just a /. Why? Well, because we already have the base here. We have API people. So that's how the route is going to start. And then we just have the /. So this will match whatever I have in the app.js. And since in the get and in the post, both of them just have API people, well, I simply go with /. Again, I fully understand that this might look a bit confusing in the beginning, but again, the more routers you'll set up, the easier it's going to get. So this will just match whatever path I have here, whatever base path I set up in my app.js. So I'm just saying, yes, I'm using this people router, and in the people, since I already have base path in place, I can simply reference it using the forward slash. So this is going to match whatever I have in app.js. And once I've spent what seems like an eternity on the base path, I can keep on scrolling. And again, notice I have API, people, and then Postman. So what's the only thing that I need here? It's just a Postman, because I already have API people. So I remove this sucker here, keep on scrolling, then the same with ID, right? We only care about this one. That's the whole point of setting up the router, so we can start splitting up our functionality in multiple files. The same goes with this last ID. And even though I think I said that we're not going to use the Postman, I do want to quickly check. And I'm going to go with get simple. If the get works, trust me, the other ones work as well. So we go here with API people, we send, but unfortunately I get the error. That's interesting. So let me check. I think the problem here is in the app.js. I don't have the forward slash. So let me try this one. Let me send it one more time. And there it is. Now, of course, everything works. So my apologies. I forgot to add here forward slash. That's why we were getting the error. And now, of course, everything works. I can go with get. I can get my list. If I want, I can also maybe delete a person. So I'm going to go with delete and we're going to test 3. So let's see, we send, and as you can see, the person with ID of 3 is missing. So as you can see, our routes works. So that's the first step. So now here's the challenge. Try to repeat the same thing with login. Now with login, it is going to be a bit simpler because we don't have that long of a path. But again, stop the video and try to set up the login yourself. And then once you're ready, resume it, and we're going to do it together. How was it? Hopefully you were successful, and now I'm going to give it a shot. So first, remember, we needed a file. So in this case, I do have auth.js. Awesome. So I'm just going to cut this sucker out from my app.js and place it in auth. Then, of course, I do need to have the boilerplate for the router. So again, let's go with express require. We require the module by the name of express, of course. Then we set up our router, and that one is equal to express.router. We invoke it. Then we change this value around like so. And then we're just going to go with module and then exports. And that one is equal to our router. We do this, then we navigate back to app.js and we'll have to import it as well. So we go with auth, I guess let's call it that. And we're looking for auth file. That's where our router is coming in. And then of course, I just need to set up my middleware, my app.use, where I provide a path of what? Well, of login. And in this case, I'm going to be more careful and I will add the forward slash. And of course, I'll set it up as auth. So let's save this one. And then the only thing we need to do in the login is simply change it around where I'm already handling the login in the app.js. So forward slash login. So again, my root now is forward slash login. So I simply go with the forward slash. I already covered the root in the app.js. So I don't need to do that anymore in here. And you know what? For this sucker, just to make things a bit more interesting, why don't we use the browser? Now, keep in mind, you can still use the Postman if you want, but I'm going to go the browser route. So we're going to go with new window. I'm going to go with 5,000 here. And of course, this is going to be the small screen. I have traditional form. So let's go with some kind of name, Peter, and I send, and I have welcome Peter. And of course, if that is the case, I know that my functionality works. So we are in good shape. Again, probably the most confusing thing is this one, where we use app.use to set up our route. So all the routes that will start with this API people are going to be located in the people.js in the routes folder. And in there, instead of using app, we use the router. And then since we already have the base set up in the app.js, when we have a route that exactly matches the base, we just go with /. Now, if there is something else after the base route, so some additional info, of course, then we go with /, which just means that we match the base path and then we add whatever value we want.